I mean, it doesn't get any more classical than that, you know? You've got Tom Petty on one side and you've got the Wiggles on the other.
Yes, that's easy math that even I can do.
That's how I felt about Captain America recently.
Right.
I'm like, oh
Yeah.
my God, I've got to go do homework now because I'm so lost.
I'm not very Scottish, but that's somehow we got that.
Thistle, why you work?
I don't recall it, but it does sound like me.
Okay, can I get that back?
The helmet catch.
What makes this guy a legend? I don't fucking get it.
Yeah, my dad's from South Jersey, so I'm actually an Eagles fan. I don't know. My manager maybe wouldn't want me to say that and pick a side.
Ran to Spotify, discovered you, wrote him, here we are. Welcome to Unshut, a place where if at any point you feel like you need to shut the up, don't. How's it going?
Been great. Very busy, but it's been fun. I'm in final season at school, just kind of creeping up, and but it's been good. Thank you so much for having me. How about you?
Dude, thank you so much for making the time out of your busy day to be on in the evening with me. I'm
Of
pumped.
course. Absolutely.
But my day's been so good. I've been looking forward to this all day. Super excited about it.
Thank you so much. Me too.
You're in New Jersey, correct?
That's right. Yeah. Up in Bergen County, so North Jersey. I go to Rutgers, so most of the time I'm at my dorm there. That's not where the fancy microphone is, so I'm home right now. But that's in New Brunswick, which is right in the middle of the state. So that was one of the main reasons I picked it, is because it's about 40 minutes from everything. So that's a good place to be when I'm trying to jet around.
So is it about 40 minutes away from your house?
Just about, yeah. I'm about an hour, 52. Depends on the traffic. We live, especially up where I live in Paramus, all of the major New Jersey highways are cutting through. So sometimes that little 15-minute radius will take you an hour to get through. But yeah, today it was about an hour. So it was good day for it.
Very cool. Well, are you born and raised from like in New Jersey?
Yeah, absolutely. Most of my family's, from New Jersey. My dad grew up. He moved around a little bit, but primarily he was South Jersey, born in South Jersey, and my mother's from up here, so they kind of settled up here in Bergen County, and that's where I've been ever since. So,
Amazing. Well, listen, let's jump right into it. Let's talk about your
absolutely.
living situation. Would you ever see yourself living anywhere outside of Jersey, or is Jersey where you're planning on staying just a little bit longer, even after school?
I'm totally okay with moving somewhere else. It's not something that is really on my radar right now, but that's just because I don't really have a reason to leave, and I like it here a lot. But if for some reason I got an opportunity that had to take me to, LA or Boston or, just across the river into New York City or something like that, I would jump on it. I definitely think getting out at some point would be good just to, kind of immerse myself in a different culture. But that said, I do like it here. So if I end up staying here the whole time, I won't be worse for wear for it.
What about anywhere else in the East Coast? If you could pick anywhere else just in the East Coast to stay at, where would you stay? Because I love Connecticut. It's my favorite.
Oh, Connecticut's great. Unless you're driving through it at the wrong time, it's great. When you hit that Hartford traffic, going up to Boston or something. But, I mean, the easy answer, I guess, is to say New York City, just because I'm less than 15 miles away. So, that was always a really achievable place to go or do gigs or something like that. But, that said, I spent a little bit of time in Boston just this year. I had a tour date up there, and I liked it so much that I had a couple days off over spring break, and I just went back up to hang out because I liked it so much. So I'd probably need to research it a little bit more to determine and actually make that answer. But right now, I'll say Boston because it's beautiful up there.
I love Boston as well too. I've only been there once and I fell in love with it. I love it. So yeah.
Right, absolutely. It's a good size. It's like it feels a little bigger than it actually is, and then you walk somewhere and you go, "Oh, that wasn't that bad."
It is. And the best way I can describe it to people, it's like it gave me New York vibes, just less congested. So it was like the perfect scenery for it to not be so chaotic. And I just
Right.
fell in love with it. So
Yeah, and it's kind of old too. It still kind of has that pre-revolution vibe in a lot of places, which almost gives a little European. So it's kind of like best of all of the worlds.
dude, 100%. I don't know if Nate talked to you about how I discovered your music. Did he give you a rundown or anything or no?
I don't think so. No.
Well, it was the coolest coincidence ever, and I don't even think he caught on to this, but I was doom scrolling on TikTok one afternoon, just literally within seconds of me getting ready to start another recording. So I like to get in just a little bit early, and I'm just scrolling, switching from app to app, trying to get distracted so my endorphins don't kind of like betray me while I'm getting ready to record, you know?
Yeah.
So I distract myself. Well, I opened up Instagram, and within 2 seconds of opening Instagram, I come across one of your songs, and it's a post, but I didn't know that you were collaborating on that post with Impulse Artists. And so I commented, I'm like, so good, heart emoji or fire emoji, exited out of it, didn't do anything, right? Shortly after, I got a notification that Impulse Artists commented, and I'm like, Jake, what? Like that? it wasn't registering. I was like, what is happening right now? So I open it, come to find out it's Nate, and it was a collaboration with one of his posts. And so the reason I exited out is because I told Nate later on in an email that it was one of the first times I had listened to a quick snippet of a song and immediately ran to Spotify to look it up because I
Wow.
was like, who the hell is this voice? What is this writing right now? Ran to Spotify, discovered you, wrote him. Here we are.
Well, thank you so much. That's really kind of you. And yeah, I love Nate. He's relatively new to sort of, the team, and I'm really, really grateful to, have him on. He's been on for about a month or two now, so it's been a ton of fun. And thank you again for listening.
No, for sure. I
Yeah.
was just like, man, and I'm sure you get this a lot too, It's very easy because we live in a world of social media, right? We're judging everyone by first looks, first appearances. And I'm sure you get this often where it didn't really register when I heard the quality of lyrics. Heard the voice, saw the young face, so I'm like intrigued, and I'm very intrigued by artists in that way. And I don't accept submissions for the show. I do invite only. And so to me, I take it very personal when I'm immediately captivated by an artist. So it just happened to be you. I'm sure you get that a lot. How do you respond to people when they're so surprised by your age, what you look like, but what you're writing, the quality of the writing? It's just incredible.
Well, that's really kind of you. It's something I'm really grateful for because I would be doing this even if nobody was listening. It's something that I've always gravitated toward, and it always just brings me a lot of joy. And so I'm always really grateful when people decide they want to listen or want to talk or something like that. So it means the world. And I grew up with a lot of influences who, especially in the classic rock field. Like when I was sort of coming into loving them, they were much older, but they started when they were my age or even younger. And so it was always really interesting to hear me as I sort of, at least attempted to come of age and listen to some of the interviews of them, either talking retrospectively or from, back in the early 70s or something, and them having, sort of similar things to say. And I think that was really something that has helped me, sort of like at least attempt to model my trajectory a little bit. So.
Dude, absolutely. Well, the fact that you're compared to a lot of these legends, right, which we'll touch a little bit about your inspirations here a little bit later, but how do you handle the pressure of some of these comparisons? Because they're massive, they're incredible.
Well, I really appreciate that. I try to take everything in a good way. I try to take it with a grain of salt because I found that, and it's a privilege to be able to say it, but I've found that when I release a new song or I'm playing for a new audience or something, I've noticed the people typically compare me to the people they already like. Which is an amazing thing because I'd rather them say that than, oh, I think you sound kind of like Bruce Springsteen. I hate Bruce Springsteen, like I don't want that, but I've noticed, like, especially like I just put out a song a couple weeks ago. I know that my fans that are big Bruce Springsteen fans say, I love it. I love the Springsteenness. And then the fans that are big Tom Petty fans will say, oh, that sounds like it could have been a Tom Petty song or whatever. So I'm really, really grateful for those comparisons. It's never something I'm aiming for, but all of these artists, whether, new or old or whatever, they're just, I think they're so ingrained in me that I probably do it, subconsciously, but I'll take it while I can.
Dude, absolutely. I'll tell you very, openly. I specifically when it comes to Bruce, I was never very knowledgeable, I guess you can say, into his music. And it wasn't until very recently when I was like, what makes this guy a legend? I don't fucking get it. Like, I don't get it. When I tell you, I was like, oh, because he does this song. It's music we all know, but sometimes for someone like me, I didn't necessarily correlate the songs to the name. And I got schooled on why these songs are so timeless. I was just like, oh my gosh, like talk about for me, someone who was a little, well, a lot of late to the game when it came to someone like Bruce. I was like, oh my gosh, like I was so late to it, but little did I know that I knew almost every single hit because
Yeah.
that's what makes him a legend?
It's incredible. Yeah, it's funny. I kind of had a similar story to that. I remember I guess I was 12 and I was playing, these ice cream shops or these open mics or just on the street or whatever, just trying to get out there and hang out. I was doing it in this room anyway, so I may as well do it in front of people. And I'm from New Jersey. I'm a white kid with an electric guitar. So like naturally it was just like, well, do you know any Springsteen? You know any Springsteen? So finally I just said, all right, whatever. Like apparently it's the law to learn Springsteen. So I learned one song. I learned No Surrender, and I put it up on Facebook, and I shared it with a Springsteen page. And I really didn't think anything of it. It's like, all right, he's pretty good. And then about a week or so later, I got a message on Facebook, and it was this guy. He said, hi, I'm doing a Springsteen kind of celebration weekend at my hotel in Wellingborough, England, and we want to fly you out. We'll fly out your family or whatever, because I was 12, and we'll get you up there and you can, stay and it's a free trip to the UK and we want you to do two-hour sets of Springsteen across from the weekend. So once we determined, my parents and I, that it wasn't a scam and he really was inviting this 12-year-old to go play his hotel, it was like, great, well, obviously I'll do that. But then it was 2 months later, I had to learn 4 hours worth of Springsteen and I knew one song. So it was definitely a mandatory deep dive that sort of got me into him the same way you. It's like you can go back and say, oh, I know this song already. I know this song already,
No, totally. Do you think that at 12 years old, that was the first time in this, I guess, musical path that you were on where you felt seen for the first time, where the possibility of reaching a stranger with your music became a reality, if that makes any sense?
Yeah, for sure. It was definitely one of them. That year in particular, there was that would have been. I went over there in 2017, but I guess I would have been asked in very late 2016. That year in particular, I think was a pretty formative year for me. I had started playing in 2014, I guess. 2013-ish, it's all, a blur. But I'm also a really big fan of this guy named John Hyatt. And it was in 2016, he had called me up on stage to play his encore with him. Like, I didn't expect anything of it. It was one of my first concerts. So I just sent a message into his Facebook and said, hey, I'm going to be at the show. It's going to be fun. Whatever. I'm a musician. And I didn't expect a response or anything. And he didn't, but then suddenly he comes out for the encore and he goes, there's a 12-year-old in here tonight. And, he's a classic rock guy. So I'm sitting here thinking, I can't believe there's another 12-year-old in the audience. But sure enough, he was talking about me, and I went up and played the encore with him. And that was the first time I'd ever played in a theater. It was one of the first times I'd played like in front of a seated audience. And so that, and then also being asked to do this in that sort of 20s, the 12 to 13 age range, those were two really formative moments to be like, "All right, maybe I do want to do this for a living.
Do those memories help you kind of see what the possibilities of your trajectory could be? Do you think that storytelling, these amazing stories that some people would say, oh my gosh, that's so surreal, does that help you kind of picture what your trajectory could look like in 10 years from now?
I think so, absolutely. I'm really grateful that I didn't pick any of my influences because they seemed like nice people. I liked it because they wrote great music and it was something that spoke to me. So the fact that, I've been able to be around some of these influences and they have been incredibly warm for me, and really supportive and just, especially when they're in positions where they absolutely don't have to be. Nobody is telling Bruce he has to be nice at this point when he can do 3 nights in a row at like the biggest stadiums in the world. So, between him and John or any of the musicians that I've been able to sort of, I've looked up to now for, 15 years, some of them, it's and being 21, that's like an incredible portion of my life to be kind of tunnel vision focused on somebody. So then to get to sort of interact with them in one way or another and seeing how warm they are is it's really touching for me because they don't have to do that. And then also I know that if I want to get into this field, it's certainly possible to be, a nice guy and a reliable guy or shows up on time or something. And I feel like sometimes when you hear the stories in the media about musicians, especially like rock musicians or indie musicians, like in the field that I consider myself, sometimes you only hear the bad and you're like, oh, I hope I don't turn into that.
Well, you were definitely on time for today's interview, so you're off to a great start.
Thank you.
Amazing. So you mentioned being 21, and I kind of want to segue into this topic very briefly because I'm truly curious. Do you think that your love for some of these legends comes with a misconception that you're out of touch with current pop culture, if that makes any sense?
Yeah, I think definitely, to a certain extent, it's a little hard for me to say because I currently don't consider myself out of touch with pop culture. However, there was certainly a time, maybe 5 years ago, 10 years ago, where I absolutely was. I got into sort of classic music at a really young age. When I was 3 years old, my parents let me stay up to watch the Super Bowl, or at least half of it, to think I'd get into sports or something, which is absolutely not the case. But Tom Petty and the Heartbreakers played the halftime show, and for some reason, I don't know why, I was mesmerized by it. And then I'd go on YouTube, and it would recommend other artists. So that's really how I got into it. So I think there was certainly a time, in elementary school and in middle school, and even a little bit of high school, where I sort of barricaded myself into those walls and was. I think it was partly coming from a contrarian aspect too, because maybe I felt cool to be like, what's a One Direction? I like Bruce Springsteen or something like that. But I certainly have grown out of that, and I'm a huge fan of modern music in general as well. Not just because the label urges me to, listen to some pop stuff to sort of develop that sensibility, but I've come to love it, and it's they've been major influences on me as well. So I suppose it does come with that conception, but I don't know if I can speak on it because I absolutely was out of touch such at some point. So, you know.
Well, I'm smiling so big for two reasons. One, I'm getting ready to segue into this Super Bowl experience that you talked about. But two, I'm smiling because I can totally relate to that in a very cheesy way. I've made fun of myself about this on the show, about how when I was younger, I wanted to be the black sheep so bad when it came to music. I'm a music lover. And as a choreographer, a lot of people thought that like I only listened to like pop music and hip hop music. But little did they know that my influences came from like classical rock, heavy metal, punk rock, ska punk. One of them, when it came to pop music, I always listened to what wasn't so popular. So my it thing when I was younger, so many listeners are going to laugh about this because I've talked about this before, is while everyone was talking about all the pop girlies in middle school, I was like, well, I listened to Jennifer Love Hewitt's music because she was an actress, but she had some music, but it was very underrated. She wasn't topping the charts or anything. So that was my it thing. So I barricaded myself in figuring out music that really wasn't so popular for my age, I guess you can say. So I was smiling about that. But very quickly, before we move on to the Super Bowl thing that you mentioned, who are some out of genre artists people would be surprised to hear you say you enjoy or that you would like to collaborate with?
Oh wow, yeah, absolutely. You know, it's tough for me to consider sort of out of genre because I don't. I mean, I guess if we're talking classic rock, there's a ton of out of genre people, but if we're looking at the sort of just pop rock indie umbrella, the when people ask what type of music I play, I give them this long winding list of genres. There might not be too many people out of that, but I'm a huge fan of the 1975 and most of what Jack Antonoff touches in general. The Lana Del Rey stuff or the Sabrina Carpenter stuff has definitely been getting played a lot recently. So that I'll say it was that I did a charity event in New York City in the fall where I ended up opening for DMC from Run DMC, which is like a crazy bill to see my name on a poster with that because that's not something I ever pictured playing. So I'll say them too, of course. And I'm just such a big fan of music and innovators in general. So any of those guys, whether they're in genre or not, I'm really inspired by. So.
Well, thanks for answering that because I've been so curious to kind of get that out there so that people wouldn't just categorize you into the one category that some people would place you in with, being in touch with the legends and the classical rock. Because I do hear a lot of even blues in your music. I hear pop, I hear rock, I hear so many different genres in yours.
See you're reflecting on the pain. Imagine the water drops rain down the glass, make their escape. You must be jealous, but hey, you stand out there all the same. You can move away from home, but it'll miss you. And we both know that's a reason that you can't escape. Take some time before it takes you. Still be there tomorrow. Brooklyn can wait. Brooklyn can wait.
I was curious to ask you about that, but I couldn't segue into Super Bowl any better because you've talked about being 3 years old, watching the Super Bowl halftime, and Tom Petty is all you remember. First of all, did you ever figure out what football game that was? Who were the two games
Oh
playing?
yeah. Yeah, it was the Patriots versus the Giants. I don't remember anything about the games. Like I actually remember watching it. I think it's my first memory is seeing Tom Petty. So I'd be lying if I said I remember these things from the game, but I have heard about it since. But yeah, it was in Arizona. It was the famous game with the helmet catch. Yeah, the Giants won. They defeated the undefeated Patriots. I'm not a Giants fan, but I grew up in Giants country here, so I suppose that's something to be proud of.
By
But yes,
default.
exactly. So that's yeah. My dad's from South Jersey, so I'm actually an Eagles fan. I don't know. My manager maybe wouldn't want me to say that and pick a side, but but anyway, yeah. So it's interesting with that too because I remember nothing about the game, but apparently it was a pretty interesting game.
Very cool. Well, a couple of questions in regards to Super Bowl related things, right? What's the last Super Bowl halftime that you did watch?
I watch pretty much all of them. It's I've been able to I'm incredibly fortunate to become friends with a couple of the Heartbreakers, and so they know this story many times over. So every time I'm watching the Super Bowl halftime show, I'm sort of texting them like, "Are you watching this?" Like, I'm still fascinated by like, "Do you remember when you were playing?" and everything like that. But yeah, I mean, I thought Kendrick's was incredible. for so many different reasons. Also, the one with Dr. Dre and Snoop and all those people, I thought that was incredible as well. I mean, that kind of almost reminded me of sort of the row of classic people who had done it. I think the year I was born, it might have been Paul McCartney or The Who or something like that. And then it was the Rolling Stones and Petty and Springsteen and Bon Jovi. And it was a string of classic rock artists. And then they went more pop in the 2010s. So getting to see some of these more classic hip hop artists was really cool because it's like, all right, now it seems like they're going into the next decade of classic people have been made.
Dude, I actually never put that together until just now that you're saying it. I'm like, wait a minute. There is a little bit of like I'm blanking out, like a not a genre, but like a theme. There's a theme there and I never caught that. That's so cool.
Yeah, I guess, I don't know anything about the choosing. I always assumed it seemed like it was the famous sort of wardrobe malfunction year was the year before all the classic rock people. So I would have to assume they were like, oh well, I can't imagine Tom Petty's gonna have a nip slip. Let's just start getting safer people up. I don't know the thought process, but that's what I would imagine happened.
Totally. If one day you're asked to play the Super Bowl halftime performance, first question, who are you bringing out with you?
Oh wow, that's a tough one. I mean, it means so much to me. It's not something I necessarily expect, but I certainly would say yes to it. On this in particular record, that I'm making now, it's been really inspired by guys like, Sam Fender or the 1975 or something. And I know specifically that they can put on a really good show. So I'll say them because, I always need a little bit of energy up on stage. So if you get those guys up there, they might be able to carry it,
Very cool. Well, I know you kind of already said Run DMC being one of them that was just like, whoa, never thought I would see that on the same poster. But I'm also curious, what artists can you think of to bring out with you that no one would expect? Like an off the wall random artist, if that makes sense.
Oh wow, yeah, that's a good one. I'm trying to think now. I think it'd be really fun to bring out, because I tend to gravitate more toward like the pop rock side. So somebody that's a little bit more, just specific pop, I think would be cool. And then we can kind of, combine our sounds. So, and of course the Super Bowl would want mega stars. So, maybe an Olivia Rodrigo or a Sabrina Carpenter or something, and see if we can kind of merge those genres a little bit.
Well, I definitely see it happening. I don't think this is just hallucination speaking. I think it could happen.
That's kind of you. I appreciate it.
Of course, something I want to talk about with you real quick. It's about your songwriting, but of course, with a little bit of an unshut twist, because if you know anything about the show, the premise is asking you questions you haven't been asked about on record before. And something I was very curious about, an interview that you did a while back, was talking about your mom being this like workout buff, is what someone called her, right? So I wrote on my notes, I heard mom was a fitness buff. Let's go off of that. First of all, is that true?
Yes, that's true. Personal trainer and a yoga teacher and yeah, and also an English teacher. But yes,
Very
I'm
cool.
not necessarily a fitness buff, but maybe one day it'll be contagious. But that's yet to be the case.
Hey,
You'd be horrified how many jelly beans I ate over the Easter weekend here. So that might not get the seal of approval from mom, but
but hey, you have your primary contact for when you start training for the Super Bowl halftime
yeah,
performance. That's your
exactly.
go-to woman right there.
Yeah, that's true.
Has mom's passion for fitness ever inspired any song?
That's a good question. I don't think it has yet, but that probably is more a reflection on me not being inspired by fitness than her. Yeah, I mean certainly I think a lot of what I write, I don't think there's too many sort of direct inspirations. I feel like there's a couple different types of writers and I've always felt like I was in one camp trying to get into the next camp, but there's the people who just really like stories and want to just portray these sort of stories that can get an emotion across. And that's kind of how I've always considered myself. I've loved writing and stories in general. And then there's people I think who write, to really clear their conscience or get off their chest or, it's like their form of therapy. And I think some of the best writing of all time comes from that second camp. And I think I'm more in the first camp. So one of these days I do look to sort of fade into the second camp and sort of more directly channel influences in childhood or something like that into my writing. And so when I do, I'm sure the fitness will come up.
Totally. Well, I would love to hear it, but definitely humor me for a second. I want to see kind of how you think quick on your toes or what's the first thing that comes to mind. But when it comes to your parents, there's no music or there aren't any lyrics to it. Let's say we're making a song based off of a song title. What would you name a song title inspired by your mom and one inspired by your dad? Just the
Oh
song
wow.
titles, and let's go with that.
All right, yeah. Uh For my mom, I think I will say I think a good song title for that would be, The Worker or something like that, because she works very hard. She's a teacher, and in addition, she does the personal training, and she's a yoga teacher, and she really likes to stay busy in general, and that's something I can certainly relate to. I love staying busy or whatever, so The Worker sounds better than just busy, so I'll say The Worker.
I
Yeah.
love that. Well, and you're absolutely right. It's something that you do have in common. It may not be the fitness thing, but keeping busy. I mean, you're in school, you're pursuing music, and music is not just something you whip out a guitar, hit record, and air it, right? So I
Right.
love that. That's amazing. What about for your dad?
Let's see. Yeah, for my dad, I think I mean, he's also a very hard worker, but I would say for him, it's just he's been. I'm stalling while I think of a title, but I know that I would write about the fact that he is he certainly always sort of put others above himself. That not that my mom hasn't, but I played music for roughly 10 years before I could get a car or a license, so, he would drive me to a bunch of stuff. So, for him, I guess I would just say, I'm trying to sum it up into a word, but, for him, I guess I would say, I would call it like Sunday afternoon, actually, I think, because I had a gig every Sunday afternoon from the time I was like 12 to 16, and he's a football fan, and I'm sure he would have rather have been watching football, but he was always a really good sport in bringing me to that gig. So I'll call it Sunday afternoons and kind of write about that story.
Dude, I got goosebumps because I feel like this is literally why I like to put artists on the spot in this positive way and in this inspirational collaboration type of style, because that literally made me think of something I heard. I don't have this on my notes, but you talked about in an interview I was listening, prepping for today, about you went and had your first legal drink at a bar that you did a gig. Is that the Sunday
That's
afternoon gig?
That's the very gig. That's right. Yeah. It's a bar called Jigs up in North Jersey. I was the youngest person in this band, without exaggeration, 70 years. It was Lou Pallo and friends. Lou Pallo was Les Paul's rhythm guitarist in the Les Paul trio. And so, I was 16 and he was 86. So it really was 70 years. That's easy math that even I can do. And we played together every Sunday from the time I was 12 to, when I was around 16 in the pandemic. And, he ended up passing, but he was just such an amazing person in general, but just a jazz guitar player. They called him the man of a million chords because he would never play a chord the same way twice, and it was incredible. So I learned so much from him. But yeah, it was around 4 to 8 every Sunday, which is like, he missed a lot of football games bringing me to that. So I appreciate it.
Dude, that is the coolest thing. And my hands are sweaty because I call these magical moments on the show. I'm like, the answer couldn't be better. And I always say this on record, we do not prep for these interviews. So if one day The Worker and Sunday Afternoon makes it onto a record, don't worry, I won't ask for credit, but I will definitely cry in my room of joy for you, okay?
That's kind of you. Thank you so much.
Of course, it's so awesome. Well, we're definitely not done with the inspirational vibes yet, because something I thought was so funny and super adorable was you talking about how when you were little, you were so into the Wiggles. That's true, right?
Yes, yeah. It was my first concert, although I don't specifically remember it. I've been told that was my first concert. So,
Very cool. I mean, it doesn't get any more classical than that, you know? You've got Tom Petty on one side and you've got the Wiggles on the other.
yes, exactly.
Well, this prompted me to ask you, if you could give any children's lullaby a Jake take on it, which one would you reimagine?
Oh wow, that's a great one. It's I don't know if it's a lullaby, but while we're talking about the Wiggles, a fruit salad is one that's popping up. I think that'd be a fun one to put on a record. Get some Jersey saxophone in that or something, and make it go. I like that song. I still actually do think of that song from time to time, so I'll say that one, even though it might not be a classic, lullaby.
I love to hear it because whenever I hear children's lullabies that are reimagined, I immediately think of like scary movies. Like,
Yeah.
when it's like they do the softer take on them. So I was like, I have to ask him this to see if he would give it a dark spin or if he would give it a classical rock spin. So that's very cool. I like it.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Yeah, I'll keep it uplifting. It's hard to make fruit salad scary. You know.
Well, listen, if you ever want to give it a shot, send it my way for Halloween and we can celebrate.
Sounds great.
Well, I think it's very cool that you've been very connected with music since you were literally a toddler, right? You talked about feeling lucky that you have had a diverse group of friends while you were in school. They all shared different musical tastes, so you never really felt disconnected from them. In regards to not music, right? So something like movies or TV shows, what disconnected you from your friends since music wasn't one, if that makes any sense.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. I think one of the reasons it's kind of a non-answer, but one of the reasons there was not much musical disconnect was because of how much of a disconnect there was in terms of the fact that the majority of my friends, especially middle school and high school, really aren't or weren't music fans. Like, I mean, they liked music, they listened to music, I suppose, but out of all of my friends to this day, I'm still in contact with most of the ones I was referring to in that interview in high school. I don't recall them ever going to really a concert or feeling like passionate enough to like buy merch or buy a CD or something like that. So I think that's one of the reasons we didn't really have a disconnect was because it wasn't like I like classic rock, he likes hip hop, and like we clash on that. It was more like I like classic rock and he's like indifferent. So that we always our thing was always we would all get together and go see movies. So that really wasn't too much of a disconnect there. Although they might have liked superhero movies a little bit better than I did, but I always went and saw them and had a great time too.
What would you have preferred if it was up to you to pick the movie? What genre would you be watching?
Well, in their defense, that's probably all that was coming out, in the time that we were eligible to like drive ourselves to the movies at 17. That's like the era of Avengers and everything like that. But I'm a big fan, I think, just because they're so rare of sort of like the one-off action movies. Like I feel like so much is franchise oriented when we can go watch something like The Departed or, Catch Me If You Can, or like one of those movies that really it's not preparing for an eventual sequel, or even if it is, if it's more contained, you know what I mean, and it's like a part one and a part two or something. I always gravitate towards those just because I think we should support them while they exist because it seems like these days everything a spin-off or a sequel.
Dude, totally. And then it's so hard to keep up with. You're like, then,
Right.
I know for someone like me, then I'm like so not I'm disencouraged. I don't think that's a word, but I'm not encouraged to go watch it because then I'm like, well, I haven't followed the last two of them and it's not going to make sense to me. So I kind of fall off. So I totally get it for sure.
Right. Yeah. I was just asked, I forget what it's called, but I was asked to see the new, there's a new Marvel movie coming out. I'm like, oh, great. Now I got to go do homework because I haven't seen one in 2 years. But I like them. But yeah, I don't mind doing the homework, but.
That's how I felt about Captain America recently.
Right.
I'm like, oh
Yeah.
my God, I've got to go do homework now because I'm still lost.
Mhm. Exactly.
Well, since we're kind of on the topic about, classmates and, that whole era of your life, you were in choir in a jazz band. Is that correct?
Yes. Yeah. Middle school and high school, actually. But yeah, when I was a senior in high school, I was president of both choir and jazz band, which it's not really a brag. There was no responsibility that came with it for the most part. But,
It was just a cool title.
yeah.
Is there anything you learned being involved in those musical programs in school that now still helps you as an adult musician?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Especially jazz band because it's something I loved and I wish I did more now than as much as I did then because it's not something I come across much with my own band. With my own band, there's such defined roles, and that's how I like it and that's why I run my band that way. But, it's like kind of more, I guess, like the people we talked about before in terms of like I play mostly rhythm guitar and sing and the lead guitar plays the solos and sings background and things like that. And, there's just such a lack of structure when it came to jazz that I loved and how, especially the big band jazz, how we structured it at school was school ended at 2:30, 2:45 to 4, you had the big jazz band where you'd play reading sheet music or whatever. I don't really read sheet music, but I pride myself that I was excellent at pretending like I did. I would sit out the first run and learn it by ear, and then I'd play along the second run, and everybody thought I was reading the music. But then once 4 o'clock rolled around, everybody would leave except the combo, and that was just like me on guitar, a bass, a drums, a trumpet, a saxophone, and another saxophone or something like that. And I loved combo even better because, it was just, you played the head of a song, and then it was just free for all. Everyone could solo, and that's not something we're doing too much, at my own live shows. So having that sort of lack of structure and that ability to play off other musicians like that was really unmatched, and it certainly helped me a lot.
Dude, is there an instrument that came a little bit more difficult to you to listen to and basically like replicate the sound? I mean, you obviously have a good ear with all these instruments. Is there one in particular that maybe you were like, oh, I should probably learn to read it? Or were you like that across the board?
I can't read any music. I primarily I'm on guitar. In jazz band, I was always either guitar or in a pinch they could throw me at piano. Especially back then, I'd be a little better at it now, I think. But so on guitar, there was certainly a time I was better at reading. If you gave me a piece of music now and a day or two, I could do it. But I'm not one of those guys you just throw the sheet in front of him and then he can just do it. I was incredible always incredibly impressed by that. Yeah, for me, I always learn best diving into the deep end. So I didn't read a lick of music. And so instead of going to do lessons, I just didn't think there'd be enough pressure for me to actually practice and do that. So I just contacted the band director at my high school and asked him to throw me into the pit orchestra for the musical they did. And so the musical was in March. In February, they just handed me 90 pages of sheet music. And I was like, all right, I guess I better get going on learning this. So that's kind of how I got into that. And so a lot of it's faded by now because I'm just not doing it in my daily life. But I think in a pinch, gun to my head, in a couple days' time, I could come back with the sheet music read.
I don't know if you've ever kind of put these two thoughts together, so I'm curious because hearing you say this, I'm immediately thinking, could that be why you're so in touch with the lyrics that you write? Because it's all based off of feeling and not something that was taught, if that makes sense.
I suppose, yeah. It's funny. I'm really happy with the way I was sort of brought up in music because, I worry that a lot of kids who are learning are sort of dropping out because of the structure. And I think music, there's no rules. It's very creative and it's something that you can kind of approach from any angle. So I always say when I started learning guitar, I really wasn't learning the guitar. I was just learning songs I knew I wanted to learn how to play, and that's what kind of taught me it. Along the first song I learned how to play was "I Won't Back Down" by Tom Petty, which is a pretty easy song to play, but it taught me the E minor chord, the D, and the G, and the C chord. And then when I learned how to play No Surrender, suddenly we were thrown in an F chord. And then, that's kind of how I learned as opposed to just the scale. And then like, this is an E minor. And it's easy enough, especially after 5 years, 10 years playing, to piece together the theory. You learn the music theory whether you want to or not. You just might not know the names. But I think learning it sort of that way on YouTube or something, or learning on stage with other musicians is really what kind of propelled me into wanting to get better at it. Then it doesn't feel like work.
Dude, 100%. And I am like so over the moon by your response because I'm like, wow, like talk about a very organic, almost kind of like the universe shifting you in a way to make you see, like, look, this is what you're meant to be doing, not learning. Just feel it out. And you went with your gut, you went with your intuition, and look what's happening. You're becoming this legend of your own by the way that you write, by the way that you orchestrate your own music. Like, I think I was reading about how you've self-produced, your music you write. Like it's just phenomenal. And so I love that connection. And I'm totally curious now because I see someone who truly bet on themselves at a very young age. You've obviously have had a lot of support with your dad who was driving you every Sunday afternoon, right? And I'm curious, outside of this familial support from home, do you recall the first time that someone praised you for your skills outside of your home, if that makes any sense?
Yeah, it was, I'm really grateful. The first open mic night I did, that was the first gig I did. I remember it was March 10th, 2014. I was 9. I was about to turn 10. And, it was an incredible response. I did 3 covers to open up the night, and I really didn't know what I was doing, but people seemed to enjoy it. I think it was probably more because I was cute, being a 9-year-old than just like, some sort of seasoned musician. But, so that really meant a lot. And, I think my grandfather, my dad's father, was one of the first people I think who really sort of, saw it for a little bit more of a bigger picture than just, oh, the kid's learning how to play a little bit. When I started playing, he was sick at the time, and I remember he was a big fan of the Steve Miller Band, so I had learned Jet Airliner for him, which was like one of his favorite songs. And so I remember him being really appreciative of that and listening to that. And he was really sick, so that was something that apparently sort of uplifted him a little bit. So I appreciated him kind of thinking like that and believing that before anybody else did, I think.
Well, and I feel like it's just important to remind ourselves of those impressions that are left in our taste buds because those are the impressions that eventually do impact the trajectory of what we end up doing in life. And so I like reminding my guests about like, hey, like, do you remember the first time you felt that? Because I do think it's important for even you as an artist, especially when you're putting yourselves in these situations where you're writing, producing, you're focused on just the art. It's so important to remember those impressions that led you to where you are today in case you ever do run low on the fuel of creativity, if that makes sense. So thanks for
Right.
sharing that for sure.
Of course, absolutely.
Well, and talking about, just things in general, because in regards to your writing and doing interviews, because you're obviously someone I wanted to have on because I was fascinated. And even though we did this on a very short notice, I was very excited to do some research on you before having you on. And you said something that really made me laugh yesterday that I ended up going into a conversation with my partner about something totally random about laundry. We're not going to get into it, Jake, because then I'll make this all about me. me. However, you talked about in an interview about having a talent for finding the hard way possible to do things. Do you recall saying this on an interview?
I don't recall it, but it does sound like me, you know.
You had said something like, yeah, I have a talent for always finding the more difficult way to do things. So,
Oh, actually, I do remember that. Yes. I think I was referring to the way I recorded my first record. Yeah.
yes, that's the interview that I'm referring to. And this prompted me to ask you because, again, you saying that made me laugh and it made me think of laundry. So, what is something outside of music you complicate yourself for no reason?
Well, I think a good example is, and it's sort of, I've turned it into a hobby, but, this summer I've gotten really into coffee. I've always really liked it, but for some reason this summer I decided I wanted to start making good coffee and, ditch the Keurig, that my family uses that still. But I bought a V60 and I started researching beans and then I bought, an AeroPress or whatever. And then I have more guitars than I probably should, but I was getting rid of a bunch this summer. I sold about four. I was going to sell three. And then started eyeing up an espresso machine, and I got a good deal on it. But it was enough money where I sold a guitar. They typically go for like 700. I got it used for 450, but I sold a guitar for like $600. So in my eyes, I was like, oh, I kind of made money on it, which is completely ridiculous to say. But anyway, then I sort of stepped back and was like, wow, I was making pretty decent coffee in a Keurig 6 months ago, and now here I am with writing down ratios and buying a coffee scale and timing things to the millisecond. I'm like, I really didn't need to do that, but I guess here we are.
And justifying the spending that went into it, right?
Right, exactly. Pretending like I made money off of it. Now I just have one less guitar.
I'm telling you, you are just a ball of inspiration for me because there's so much that I didn't write down that I am just recalling from interviews that you have done. And hearing you talk about some of the guitars that, you sold to make money, it immediately made me laugh and think of a story you told about one of the first guitars you got. It was your dad's friend's son, passed it
Yes.
down to you, asked for it back, and I thought that was the funniest story ever. But now, since you brought it up, I'm curious. Are any of the guitars that you sold a guitar that you wish you could be like, hey, can I get that back?
Not yet. Not yet. I've been very lucky. I try to be very careful of that. Growing up and working with so many musicians who are older than me, they have so many horror stories of being like, oh, in 1994, I sold a 59 Les Paul and it was the best guitar I ever had. And now they're worth $30,000 or whatever. So I really try to be careful of it because I've heard the horror stories. So far, I haven't really regretted much. A lot of the guitars I have here, they're sort of like strewn around the room, kind of like you see this on every wall. So I'm looking around, but a lot of them were gifts, which is incredibly, I'm incredibly grateful for, but, either passed down to me from musicians I've known who have passed or, just older musicians in general who are looking to thin the herd as they downsize or something and wanted them to go to a good home. And so, those are things that are really special to me that I wouldn't really plan on selling. And then, of course, I have sort of my everyday guitars that I just would be lost without. So I try to find that little Venn diagram of things that don't have too much sentimental value. And also, I'm not using even guitars. I just sold a guitar. I didn't buy a guitar if I didn't think it was great. So I still think it's great, but sometimes I look around and I just see the dust on it and I feel bad because it's like, oh, that should be getting played all the time. So, sometimes I'm okay letting it go, even just because it's not in my, playing vernacular anymore.
No, totally. Were you the type of kid that liked to name his instruments or no?
Not really. I sort of no, I can't. I'm trying to think now if I ever had a name for one. I mean, they all kind of adapted into names for sure. I have three Strats, and one is tobacco, but it's because it's a tobacco sunburst, and one is the Mexican because it's the only one that's made in Mexico. The other two are made in California. The first electric guitar I bought, which is the one that followed the one you're talking about, was a Strat, and so that one's just called the First. So they do sort of have these de facto names, but no, they're not getting named like Jenny or something like that.
Not yet, at least.
Not yet, exactly.
No, that's so cool. Well, listen, if you could name the guitar that was asked to give back, what would you have named it?
Oh man, I mean, I would name that guitar, sort of, opportunity is that because I don't even really remember that guitar. It was not a big part of my childhood. I got it when I was really young and it was cool because I was a toddler and it made noise. And then I moved on. I don't know what I started playing with instead, maybe monster trucks or something. I don't know. I don't recall a monster truck phase, but when they asked for it back, it was like, yeah, I'd have to find it. I don't even know where it was. So I was really nice of them to replace it, but I was not expecting them to replace it. I didn't need it to be replaced. It turns out I kind of did did because it gave me all this. But, at the time, it just seemed like something, it's like if you had asked for me to give back an action figure you gave me 10 years ago. I don't remember where the hell that thing is. So I was really grateful when they replaced it. It was incredibly nice of them, but it was unnecessary.
You're like, I was planning on giving that action figure to one of my friends who wants to go see the movie of
Right.
the
Yeah,
action.
exactly. Exactly. Yeah.
Amazing. Well, one last thing I want to do with you before we kind of wrap up the interview, because I love shooting the shit with my guests and again, ways that they've never done on record before. But I have to go into this by asking you, how do you pronounce your last name? Is it Thistle or Tissel?
Thistle. Yeah, TH. You use the TH. So it's the national flower of Scotland, I'm told. I'm not very Scottish, but that's somehow we got that. So.
Well, I mean, I didn't want to assume. I mean, I had
Yeah.
someone with the last name Thames, and come to find out the day of the interview, it's Thames without the
Oh, yeah.
TH pronunciation. So
That's
I
him?
didn't want to assume. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. We're on the same management.
Yeah.
I've never met him, but my band has played with him before and they love him. So,
Very
so
cool.
yeah.
Well, I was definitely thrown for a loop with the pronunciation.
Yeah.
So I'm glad it's pronounced Thistle because I created an entire segment inspired by the pronunciation of your last name. So thank God I don't have to
Okay.
scratch it.
Yeah.
The reason I created this segment with you is because immediately when I saw your name, I was like, Thistle. It made me think of whistle. And for some reason, Jake, the only thing I could think of was whistle while you work. Da-na-nut, nut, 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 nut. So I'm rocking with it because let me tell you, my mind works in mysterious ways. I will never know why, but that's all I kept hearing in my head. So this is officially going to be called Thistle while you work. Are you ready?
Yes.
The first thing I'm going to ask you before we even start is, can you whistle?
I can, yes. I'm not sure if it'll come through, but I've never put one on a song. I know some people who do it on songs. I haven't had the guts to do that, but yeah, I can break out a whistle if needed. So
Perfect, because it's going to
I
be
don't know if
needed
it
for
comes
sure.
in. Okay, okay.
So I'm going to need you to try to be as loud as possible with the whistle. I'm going to go first. I'm going to say thistle while you work, and I want to hear your best interpretation of a whistle to the da-na-nut, nut, 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 nut. Are you ready?
Sure. Yeah, we'll see.
All right, here we go.
Yeah.
Thistle while you work. Damn it, it didn't come through.
It didn't come through. All right. I'll send you a voice memo afterwards.
Perfect. Look at that. We'll voice over it later.
Yeah.
Amazing. Thanks for doing that with me. I promise you're not going to do any other weird shit on the episode. I promise. But in honor of thistling while you work, I'm going to give you some quick scenarios, and I want you to tell me if yes or no to listening to music while you do these things. Does that make
Sure.
sense?
Absolutely. Yeah.
I only have a few, so we won't do too many of them. But the first one, shower.
The answer to this is probably always going to be yes. I personally don't, but it's just because I've honestly never thought of it. I have a roommate who does, and I always think it's a good idea. And then by the time I'm getting ready to go, it's like, oh, I don't really carry around a speaker. I typically listen in earbuds or something. So rather than destroying my AirPods, personally, I say no, but I'm not against it. I think it must be a good time. So one of these days, I'll actually have the foresight to plan and do it.
Well, I mean, this is obviously not a date or anything, but if it was, I would consider that a red flag because I do not recall ever showering without any music. I just cannot do it. It's weird to me.
I kind of take the shower. Like, it's funny you say that because I find that when I'm in the shower, I'm almost always working on lyrics. So maybe the music would distract me. It's like maybe shower has been lyric time for me up to this point.
Okay, so fascinating because obviously retired choreographer. So for me, it was choreography. Not that anyone wants to see me dance naked, but I'm just saying the bathroom was always the place of inspiration for me when it came to thinking of eight counts or thinking of songs to use for a combo, etc. So very cool. Shower's a very interesting place, right?
Yes. Yeah.
All right, the next one I have is cleaning.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. It's the only way to make it not miserable, in my opinion.
Absolutely. Do you have any Hispanic in your blood?
I don't. Not that I know of, at least.
Well, according to your answer, some will say you do.
All right. I'll take it.
The third one I have is outdoor walking.
Yeah, I think so. I think there's certainly there's times where some of my female friends would say no because I know that they like to stay alert. My girlfriend studied abroad in Barcelona and she always loved walking while listening to music, but she didn't there just so she could stay alert because it was a foreign place. So I probably took a strange darker turn than you meant, but yes, actually I do listen to music while I walk.
Now I'm extremely paranoid. I'm like, I'm never walking with my fucking headphones ever again. The next one I have for you is eating.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, absolutely. Especially, I love a good, restaurant alone. Like I mean, I love hanging out with people too, but I'm certainly not opposed to just getting a booth and, sitting and eating in silence or whatever. And when I say silence, like, no phone in my hands. So if you put in the earbuds, I think it's great. I love it. Yeah.
Dude, I am the same way. A lot of people would consider that weird, and I didn't start doing this until a little bit, closer to like my mid 20s, but it was definitely something that I did found to be very peaceful for me. I loved taking myself out to grab a bite and shutting the world off, having just a little bit of music, if there's not already music playing, and then just enjoying a meal by myself. I love
Yeah,
that.
absolutely.
Amazing. Well, since we're talking about music real quick, we have to talk about Carpool Lane real quick. I want you to just briefly tell everyone the inspiration to this song before we wrap things off, since this is your latest song that just came out. Talk to us about it.
Absolutely. Yeah. I'm really excited about it. It's really the first studio release we've done in about 18 months. And so it's sort of the bridge into a new record and hopefully a new sound that, we're looking to cultivate. So it was one of the earlier songs, relatively speaking, that I wrote for this project. And I've been really excited about it. I sat on it for a while. It was sort of, I kind of ranked, I handed about 30 demos into the label. We're looking to do a 12-song record, and I sort of ranked all of them on tiers. And I think Carpool Lane was coming in around C or something like that. And so we recorded some A tracks, and then I heard it one more time, like I had shuffled everything so I could hear it and give everything a second chance. And I said, if I tweak some stuff here, this might be cool. And then, we took it into the studio, and Tyler Sarfit was the producer, and I'm just really, really proud of how it came out and how it sort of evolved from the beginning. So I'm excited about it. It's a little different of a structure than usual for me because it starts on a chorus and then goes into a verse instead of the opposite. So when I gave it to the band, we had to all kind of do the math on like what is a chorus and what is a verse. That way, when I call it out live, we don't all play a different section. But I'm really excited about it. Yeah.
Flee in the skyline like a criminal on the run. And I'm in the carpool lane driving all alone. If I had it my way, I'm not breaking any law. I'm pretending you're with me, and we're going home. Oh, oh, oh.
Well, it's such a great song. That was definitely the song that was playing on that post that made me run to Spotify. So
Oh,
I'm
thank
in
you.
love with it, of course. And, can't wait to see what the other tracks will sound like, which I'll pick your brain on that just a little bit. But I did want to ask you, the message of running doesn't necessarily free you from yourself. I know is something that was big with this song of yours. When did this realization happen for you? Is there a specific moment that you don't mind sharing about that realization?
Not necessarily. I've always just been sort of fascinated with that. I think, especially on the last record that I put out, I think you can really hear it. It's not something that really has come up too much in my personal life. I'm sitting in my childhood home right now. I haven't really felt like I've needed to run away from anything, which I'm incredibly grateful for. But there's something about that, sort of. There's a line I kind of go back to in a song that I put out on my last record that I think sort of I catch myself trying to put it in other songs just because I think it fits a lot. But it's like, it's much easier to start than it is to try again. And I always have to catch myself. I'm like, no, I can't write about that again. I feel like a lot of my songs are about that. So anyway, it comes from a point of fascination. I think it's just because, being a Springsteen fan and everything, he writes about that a lot. Tom Petty, Jackson Brown, all those people. And so for this song, I was really trying to explore sort of, I think there's like a bit of pain that comes with the ability to escape because it's like, despite the fact that you're excited that you can have a future that's new or something, there must also be a sort of problem with feeling like you have nothing to leave behind. And so Carpool Lane, I was trying to sort of, play into that a little bit.
Well, and I feel like in a way you kind of gave it such a beautiful answer unintentionally because I do think that what makes this song so powerful is that even though, like you said, it's something that you cannot directly, relate to because you haven't felt that need to escape or run away from anything from your home, it makes you an empathetic person. And being empathetic to those types of situations is where you can draw inspiration to draw what people relate to. It's what connects us all to some of these lyrics is that we don't necessarily have to live through it to be able to understand it and feel it. And even though I know for me personally, there's really nothing in my life that I'm trying to run away from right now. I feel like I'm tackling everything head on, trying to be resilient, but yet somehow I resonated to this song so much. And so, I think it says a lot about someone's ability to being empathetic and being able to write about that through the perspective of what they feel of other people. So you did it well, is what I'm trying to
That's
say.
kind of you. Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Amazing. Well, you hinted 11 more tracks to come out with this project. I know it's still a little bit early on. You just dropped this new song, but when can the audience, when can the listeners start to prepare themselves for what's to come next?
Absolutely. Yeah. We're just sort of getting back in the swing of things in terms of the release schedule. So, we're looking at roughly every 8 weeks, everyone's going to hear me knock again and release a new song. So I guess sort of mid-June will probably be the next song that comes out. And, we'll waterfall probably 4 or 5. And then in the fall, the full record will come out. So as it sits right now, we have just about 5 songs, including Carpool Lane, done. And of course, we're going back in the studio a bunch. I might self-produce a little bit as well. We'll see what happens. But, especially once school gets out and I'm a little bit more free in the summer, that's going to be the main focus.
Well, I always say we're not going to hold you to it because we know things, with the industry always change and dates are, there are a lot of moving parts to it. However, because I know personally I'm excited to see what else you put out, I'm going to be the one knocking. If you don't, mid-June, I'm going to be like, knock, knock. Hello,
Of course.
where is it?
I need somebody to do it. Somebody's got to hold us accountable.
Amazing. Well, thank you so much for your time, Jake. I've had such a blast talking with you today. Lastly, please tell everyone where they can stream your music and find you and all those good details.
Absolutely, yeah. Jake Thistle, which is my name, TH, JakeThistle.com is my website, and that's where you can find the links to all the socials and all the streaming and everything. To my knowledge, the music is out everywhere. I don't think there's a streaming service we haven't hit. I'm sure someone in some random town's gonna be like, you didn't hit this one, but anyway, I think it's everywhere. So.
Well, we're not taking requests, so if it's not playing, you're gonna have to move to listen to this good music. Just kidding. Amazing. Thank you so much for your time. We'll definitely be in touch on air date and all those good details, but super excited to have had the opportunity to talk with you today.
Absolutely, you too. Thank you so much. Really means a lot.
Of course. Take care of yourself, Jake.
Thank you. Bye now.
Bye. Hey, if you've made it this far, don't forget to follow the socials on the screen or in the description below. And don't forget to subscribe to this channel. See you next week.